and welcome to Rain Radio, where we have juicy conversations that lead to powerful transformations. We are your hosts. I'm Naomi Calderon.
And I'm Leela Sage, and today we are this is what happens when the topic goes away. We're gonna talk about the retrogrades that we're having right now, and are you hanging on to something that you've outgrown? So grab your drink and your journal, put on your crown, and let's chat. What are you drinking?
I'll give you two guesses, and the second one doesn't count.
Water!
Yes, although I did have some ginger lemon tea that I steeped earlier, but right now I'm back to water. What about you?
I was going to ask about the watermelon smoothie situation.
The watermelon smoothie is absolute deliciousness. It's watermelon and strawberries and basil and mint.
See, I need you to be drinking that one of these calls so I can be jealous in real time.
Okay.
I'm having apple juice. Like one of those pressed apple juices instead of like the concentrate, so it tastes more like cider.
The crazy processed. Oh, yum. See, that's all fall goodness to me, but yeah, yummy apple juice.
And I'm also drinking water.
Did you press it yourself?
I did not press it myself because I am not that person.
Okay.
I am meant to live next door to someone on their farm. I am not meant to be a farmer. Despite my early upbringing.
I love it. I love it.
I'm also drinking water because someone's house had suggested I do. And because it's 900,000 degrees here.
Wow, that's even hotter than here. That's pretty good.
It is. The phone says it's 96. It feels like 110, which means it's 110.
You could practically come live here for that.
Uh-huh. Except it's only going to be hotter than Satan's balls for like another month.
And we probably have 2 months of it, but it's a dry heat.
I don't know the difference.
Yeah, most people don't. But
people talk about
the nice thing is you're sweating, because we're talking about, getting rid of those things that don't serve you. You're sweating, and so you're getting rid of toxins, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that leads us beautifully into today.
Do you not sweat in humidity?
Oh, in humidity you do. You don't. You always feel sticky in humidity. It's disgusting. I don't miss that.
I don't understand the difference. So, Naomi, what are you hanging on to that you have outgrown?
Oh my gosh, I have so many examples in my life of where this has shown up. I'm going to talk about one that, for me, it's often projects.
Mm.
And typically around business projects. There have been a few times, because I'm so committed to making something work,
mm-hmm.
when that's been my intention, that's been the goal, that's been the commitment.
Mm.
And sometimes there comes a point in either a project or a job where you really, it's time to do last rites, give it a burial, be done. But I'm like, but we can make this work. I did that with my last corporate job.
Mm-hmm.
And I ignored the nudges because it was in a time, it was in 2010. I took the job in 2008, and it was 2010. And I was actually quite miserable by that time. I loved it when I first started, but stuff changes, things happen, whatever. And it became something other than what I had agreed to, and things just were devolving. But I was committed to making it work because not all the parts and pieces were moving smoothly, and I was committed to making that happen. And I will beat that poor dead horse. Oh my gosh. And I was getting nudges. But it was 2010, and here in the US, the economy had fallen apart in 2008, and it still had not built back up in 2010. And so to try to find a job that paid me what I was getting paid seemed darn near impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure I really wanted another job like the one I had.
Mm-hmm.
So I might as well just stay put instead of finding yet another one, which also probably would have required me to move. So it was easier to just stay put. The devil you know, after all, right? And so I kept going, and it was time, and I was becoming miserable, which means I was not performing at my best. Even if my work was good, my attitude was not the best. I will be honest. I look back at that and I'm like, oh my God. And so finally the universe was like, you're ignoring us. So guess what? You're not willing to leave. We're going to have it so you don't have a choice. And I got laid off. There were quite a few of us who did. Like one person from every department is where they started, but more layoffs came around, and they eventually ended up closing that office. Wow. But I overstayed my welcome. The universe is like, if you're not getting the message. My girlfriend's friend wrote a song called Cosmic 2x4, and that's exactly what I had. Right up alongside my head. So,
if it makes you feel any better, that's how I typically get my messages.
Oh God, I'm working on learning to hear them and act on them, because I was getting the nudges, but man, I had dug my heels in because I was committed to making this thing work. So I'm working on listening to them and taking action, because sometimes I hear them, but I don't take the action. That's the piece that still could maybe do a little bit better or a little more frequently. And I think I am doing it more frequently than I was then. Mm-hmm. But yeah. I don't like the cosmic 2x4s. And that's what happens when we overstay.
So in that instance, it's really simple to know that it was time to go because you were actually getting the messages. Mm-hmm. How does one know that they've outgrown something and it is time to let it go? If it's not like a pair of yoga pants that finally got a hole in an irreparable place and you have to throw them away. Like, how else do you know it's time to let something go?
I just pictured my favorite pair of pajamas from Periwinkle Rose that totally did that. The material wore so thin. I've been wearing them for like 8 years. I love these pajamas, right? They wore so thin that they ripped, and they are just not sewable. It's like, okay, just get another freaking pair already, right? So yes, sometimes, okay, that's obvious. Time for new pajama bottoms, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes those nudges aren't there. Sometimes it's not super obvious. For me, that's where having a coach is helpful. Okay. That's where journaling can come into practice for me as well, because it is in the mindfulness places. And whether your mindfulness practice is, for me, going out jogging is actually a great meditation, because it clears all the blah, 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 blah in my head and allows what's really there to come up. Mm-hmm. It helps me to drop into my body. Journaling is also helpful. But whatever that is for you, it's the people who are listening, it's that mindfulness practice, that staying aware of what's happening, what's going on. Are you feeling tightness in your body, and what is it trying to tell you? Are you constantly annoyed every time you have to do something or talk to a certain person? Or because that may give you the access to looking at, okay, is this something I need to let go of? Is it time to close this door? Right?
The answer is usually yes.
Yeah. What about for you? How do you notice and tell that, oh, look, it's like 3-day-old fish?
Well, that's why I asked you, because I'm thinking as you're talking, and I'm like, what? I mean, other than my marriage, and even once I left it, I wasn't done. Like there was still jewels at the bottom of that trash can that I needed to get out before I threw out the bag. And I'm like, I knew before I married him that that was just not gonna last. But there were great lessons and opportunities in there that I needed. So my last job, same thing. I knew when I had my evaluation. I think I knew like a year before I left when the least qualified person for the promotion that I applied for actually got it. Like, dude, it's time to go. And every time I go to work, I am annoyed, like you said. Okay, so it's time to go. But then when that position came, well, when my evaluation came around and I was filling out the form because we gave feedback on our own performance before our evaluations, and I realized that there was no place for me to go. I didn't want any of
Wow.
my boss's jobs. And I didn't think that the person that got that promotion was ever not going to be in that position. So I was just like, well, I should probably get my life together and get out of here. And then the position became available again, the promotion, and I applied but didn't get an opportunity to interview. And that was like giant blinking letters of like time to go. I was like, okay, I'm out.
Oh,
So
look at that big exit arrow.
but I don't typically pay attention to the nudges, not because I feel them and I ignore them, but because I don't recognize them as nudges.
Mm-hmm.
Like for a good 4 months, I was extremely annoyed with the job. It never occurred to me that that meant get a new job. I was just like working through my feelings about the person that I was annoyed with, and what about her was about me.
Right.
Turned
So
out to be really good. Go ahead.
always, and I think the what is this about me is going to be probably a podcast of its own because there's so much juice in that. But
Mm-hmm.
with now you recognize, oh, I was annoyed for like months, not just at this about this person, but at the job. Okay, I was, and you're starting to see some of those things. My half side likes to talk about building your library.
Mm-hmm.
And so when X happens, Y ends up taking place. Okay, so then you just kind of file that away in your library.
Mm-hmm.
And then if X happens again and Y happens afterwards, okay, so another thing to file in my library. So every time I spend 4 months annoyed with my job, maybe it's time to move. And so then maybe you can start shortening that to 3 months. And then I realize, aha, this is an opportunity to look at maybe it's time for me to leave.
Yeah.
oh, look, now it's only a month of annoyance, and I can look at maybe it's time for me to leave. And it may or may not be true. That might not be what it means, but at least it's that, oh, this is happening again.
Mm-hmm.
Aha, this feeling, this pattern, my library says, and you can reorganize and resort and relabel things in your library.
I
Because
love
maybe you
that.
find out, oh, I'm really annoyed at work, but maybe it doesn't mean leave your job. Maybe it means have that heart to heart with your boss that you need to,
Yeah.
or uh, set better project deadline boundaries, or whatever it is. So it may be that it gets relabeled from quit my job to something else, have a conversation, to set firmer boundaries, to pad project boundaries, whatever that is. It could get relabeled, but building that library, if you're not necessarily recognizing the nudges, is a great way to start recognizing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I love that. But it's definitely going to be helpful for me because I tend to be a hindsight person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Something that recently happened, I looked at it and went, shit, I wanted this. It was so unpleasant and so uncomfortable, but I literally spent years focused on that desire, and it actualized in a way that looked, and we'll talk about this in a future episode, it actualized in a way that looks nothing like what I wanted, and I no longer wanted it. So not only did I not want it anymore, but it looked entirely other than what I wanted. And I was just like, I wanted that. I spent years fantasizing about it and ruminating over it. And now here it is, and I'm mad. Uh,
Oh yeah, that one will definitely be a juicy conversation. Yeah, how do you stop those orders from being shipped when
mhm,
you want them canceled? Uh-huh.
yeah.
And
So
instead of being now somebody who just sees hindsight, do you think that building your own library will help you to be somebody who sees it when it's coming?
that is my hope.
Awesome.
I think that would be very helpful to like have a reference point of this looks like that. So you might want to take a look at it.
There's your sign, right?
Yes, Bill, yes. So I
Right. Thank you.
have a more challenging area of when you've outgrown something.
Hmm.
Um, Relationships.
Yeah.
So I am
But
really
is
bad
that
at,
really any different?
well, for me it is. I'm really bad at throwing friendships in the trash. I'm
Hmm.
actually bad at throwing all sorts of relationships in the trash. There are, this is amusing. Like now that I'm about to say this out loud, I'm chuckling at myself. So feel free to chuckle. Um, this guy that I used to date before my current relationship periodically texts me, and I know that he is just texting me to see if I'm still in a relationship. But I keep responding when he texts. And I'm just like, why not just stop talking to him? um, I had a friendship that I outgrew, and instead, this has happened numerous times in friendships where I've outgrown the friendship, and instead of like actually communicating with the person, I would just pull my energy back. And so they're still in my world, And most times they're not clear about why we are not as close as we used to be.
Is that a bad thing to go about it that way?
In a couple of instances, it has been awkward because
Okay.
they've been like, what happened? And I've had to be like, I don't like you anymore.
Did you say it like that?
No, but that was definitely the energy. um, both of them, I was basically like, you hurt my feelings. And so I took you away from the main dinner table and put you at the kiddie table. And those were like, that was essentially how I put it. And they were both like, oh,
Hmm.
that sucks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
They're not, I'm guessing they're not Leos. Um, so, so there's like 15 different things that are showing up around this for me. And so I'm going to try not to mangle the sentences and ask them one at a time
Okay.
instead of one big garbled mess.
We've got about 10 minutes.
All right. So, are you putting them at the kiddie table simply because you're afraid to completely cut ties? Or what's that about?
That is a fun pattern that we'll probably poke at in the future.
Okay.
The one friendship
Might
was
be
a
longer than 10
13-year
minutes.
friendship. I know. The one friendship was a 13-year friendship, and I love her, and I know that she loves me, but I needed more from the friendship than she was willing to give. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Okay.
I was like, I'm not going to throw away the whole relationship. Like, I am her daughter's godmother. Not going to throw away
Perfect.
the relationship, but not going to have you in my intimate inner circle anymore.
So that's one of the first things to look at is, am I, because holding on to something similar to what we were talking about with the job situation, when it's past its time, when its expiration date has hit, well, that doesn't sound like the expiration date hit. That sounds like it was time for it to evolve into something different.
Yeah, that was definitely an outgrown thing. Like, she had different priorities for our friendship than I did. And I don't know if I outgrew her, she outgrew me. We outgrew each other. We grew
Right.
in different directions.
Right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an ending completely, but it was an evolution, which can still sometimes feel like an ending, right?
Oh, yeah, there were endings involved. We had
Mm-hmm.
this dynamic, and that was no longer the dynamic of our relationship anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt
That's a
like
pretty
an
good
ending.
sign.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like an ending and sort of, I guess I would say, like, sounded like one
Okay.
because she went from having the title of best friend to having the title of goddaughter's mother.
Uh-huh. Woman I know. Okay.
Yeah.
So it has similar tones, but is slightly different than someone you've simply outgrown and goodbye, right?
Yeah. So the other person that happened with, um, I didn't have the skills to have that conversation with her at the time that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Same, like, well, not same, but we were really close and some hurtful things happened, and I just pulled away. And then at some point in the future, we had an opportunity to talk about it, and she was like, I just don't understand what happened to my best friend. And at that point, I was like, oh, well, here's what happened. But at the time that I pulled away, I wasn't even aware. I was just like, this person, it's not safe for her to be this close to me. It's not emotionally safe or
Mm-hmm.
mentally safe for me to be this close to her.
Mm-hmm.
So I created some space.
Well, and it's great that you say that, but then you hit this point where then there's not as much of the emotion involved, and you had evolved further down your path, and then it was, oh, well, here's what happened. Where sometimes when we're in it in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and we know I'm done with this relationship. I had a good friend who broke up with her best friend, basically her best friend from childhood. I mean, they went on vacations together. Her best friend's mom was like a second mom to her, and they still get along just fine. But she and her BFF broke up, and a number of us watched them for a very long time, trying to make the relationship work and be what it had always been, when it's simply they had grown in very different directions. They had very different value systems. And so being able to watch it from the outside speaks to what you're describing. And now theirs was a very verbal and a very, I don't believe there was name calling, but it was not an easy, it was very emotionally difficult. And it can bring up emotions like a death. There's grief involved. And I think that's the big thing to remember, whether it's a job you're leaving, whether it's a person you're leaving, whether it's moving to a new state, which I have done numerous times. There can be that, sometimes there's not, but sometimes there's that mourning process that needs to happen once we do finally recognize this no longer serves me, and I've been clinging to it like a drowning person to a teeny tiny piece of driftwood. But it's time to let that driftwood go, because if we just turn a quarter turn, there's a whole frickin' life raft that's going to take us to a boat with, margaritas and parties. And sorry, guys, that's the best analogy I could come up with. But I think you get what I'm saying, right?
Party, life raft.
Right. So, but we're clinging to this thing that always was, whether it's because this is sentimental, because this is my childhood friend, this has been my BFF, whether it's because it's this job and I want to make sure that I'm doing the right job and the best job, and there's still these projects, and I know I can make this work no matter what it is. When we get those nudges and we finally see it's time to let go, give yourself some grace. Yeah. If you need to just back away and hide from that person because you're not quite ready to have open, honest conversations, cut yourself some slack. Maybe at some point later you'll be able to do like Leela did and be like, oh, well, here's what happened.
Yeah. Or if you don't even
practice
know
those
why
conversations.
You're away. Like,
yeah.
I knew that she didn't feel safe anymore, but I didn't know how to have a conversation. I was just like, I've wanted this friendship, this kind of friendship, since I was a child. So I am not ready to completely let go of the idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kept her in my world.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just like, okay, no. I'm ready now. But that took years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Both of those took years.
One of the things that I've noticed for myself, because as you're saying, it's like, oh yeah. So sometimes it does. It's like incremental, teeny tiny, and you can't necessarily identify what's wrong, or not even wrong, but what's not right, what isn't working any longer, there's just something you wouldn't have been able to say on day one of that process. Oh, I guess I don't feel safe around her any longer. No, it took time to discern that that's what it was. You just knew it wasn't working, right?
Yeah. I was hurt and I retreated. Both times.
Mm-hmm.
Different catalysts, but
Mm-hmm.
both times.
And that gives you a place to look at how do you step into living life on your terms, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's one way to do it. I don't think that's the
Mm-hmm.
easiest way to do it, but that's definitely one way to do it.
But even recognizing that this isn't working for me, instead of trying to, I mean, you could still be trying years later to be BFFs in a way that's not working for you, or
Absolutely.
to stay in a relationship where you're getting hurt.
Yeah, or at a job that is annoying you or frustrating you or not
Sucks your
valuing you.
soul.
Your whole soul.
Your
So
whole
yeah,
soul sucks.
I think that is the very first step in like living your life on your terms, is giving yourself the space to, you know, figure out what's going to work for you, even if it's not taking that person completely out of your life or taking the job completely out of your life. With the work of Access Consciousness, the co-founder Dane here says, if something that you're doing frustrates you, like figure out how much money you would have to charge to do that thing so that it doesn't frustrate you. And you might not be able to go to your corporate boss and be like, this job frustrates me, but for $80 an hour, it wouldn't frustrate me anymore. How about a raise? Like, you may be able to have that conversation. You may not. You may have that conversation. It might not go over well, but you might get a raise. Who knows? Um, but knowing what would take the frustration out of the experience or the feeling of powerlessness out of the experience is a first step in that process of like owning your world.
Absolutely. And that's what helps to unstick you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the answer to that question might be, what would it take for, it's sort of what would it take for me to stay?
Mm-hmm. Stay and be happy.
You may stay and be happy. You may come up with absolutely nothing. Well, great. There's the access to what you need to start moving towards, is not being in that relationship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship, whatever that thing is. And you said to give yourself the space to kind of explore that. I would add to that, and the permission to leave if it's time.
Yes, even 13-year friendships.
Yeah.
20-year marriages. I hate to say that, but if everybody's miserable, what's the point?
Right.
Counting grains of sand. So,
yeah, if you can't find a way to be happy in it, maybe it's not the right place.
Yeah.
No matter how many zeros you add to the paycheck.
Exactly. So like
but be prepared. If you do go in and ask for that raise, be prepared that if they say yes, that's why it's important to know what would it take for you to stay and be happy. Don't just ask for a raise to see if they'll do it, because then you might be like, shit. I was hoping that they'd say no and take the responsibility off of me.
Yeah.
Now I have to make the decision if I'm staying or if I'm going, because they said, yeah, here's the money. Crap, right?
And definitely do not leave the universe to make those sorts of decisions for you, because you will find yourself unemployed. I found myself with a totaled car, unemployed, and my boyfriend broke up with me that week too. It was fun Thanksgiving week.
Yay, happy Turkey Day.
So definitely make those decisions for yourself.
Yeah, that's a cosmic 2x4 like you would not believe. So watch for the signs, pay attention to the signs, notice where you're getting irritable. Build your library. Not long ago, a situation happened that came up, and I was feeling anxious and irritated, and I'm like, oh my God, am I just out of wild yam? Because I wanted to burn the whole damn village down. And I'm like, but I couldn't describe to you specifically what it was. It felt like something was coming, and I was really agitated. Agitated is probably a better word than anxious. And then with what transpired, there was this huge, oh, that's what was coming. And then when I look back historically, I joke that my husband and someone he used to work with, that I joke that they broke up after 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And before that came about, I had that same feeling. And I didn't know why. I couldn't put my finger on it. There was nothing specific, but it was just this agitated, something's coming. I don't know what. I don't like this feeling. And it's a very unique feeling beyond, oh, when I'm anxious about something and same thing. And then boom, they broke up. And it was a big deal breakup. And so now I'm starting to build that library that here's my signs. Doesn't mean that I have to be afraid of what's coming, but something is changing.
And I would love
and it's time to let it go.
I would love to talk with you more about that, just the two of us, because I had an interesting experience yesterday where I realized what anxiety feels like for me.
Ooh.
And I wouldn't, like, before, every time this feeling has hit my body before, it's like, what is this? This is so weird. I feel so odd. And I would just pace because, like, I can't hold still when this happens. So,
sure.
But yesterday, I instantly knew. I was like, this is anxiety. And then I was able to look back and go, yep, I was anxious all of those times. And sometimes it was like anxiety with a little bit of homicidal tendencies attached. Like the catalyst was always something different. So I was never fully aware that it was anxiety, but I knew yesterday. Like there was nothing else to label it yesterday. And then I was able to like back label things.
Perfect. So that's going to help with your library then, because now when you feel it, that's where you get to ask yourself and look at, okay, so what is this really about?
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything that I can do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me with the agitation, until whatever that thing is, and it's usually something that really truly is out of left field.
Mm-hmm.
Like this last one, it was around my uncle dying. So it's always something at least mostly unexpected. Maybe not 100%, but mostly. And so now I know there's nothing I can do about it, like, oh, I'm anxious about this or I'm frustrated with that, because it's an unknown. But what I can do is, oh, that's that feeling, and simply relax into it and know and understand that whatever is coming is going to be okay. It's just that something is changing and shifting, and that's all right. So that I'm not, because usually when I'm agitated and in that space, it's like, I just want to burn down the whole village, and whoever happens to be standing in front of me is who's going to get the brunt of it, because I don't know how to process it, because there's nothing to grab a hold of. So if I can relax into that and just know, there's change coming. Okay. all right. And it may not ever be that graceful, but I can work towards it.
Yeah.
And for you, so then if anxiety shows up, oh, this is what anxiety feels like. So what am I anxious about? And you can start to deconstruct it, right?
Yep, I was very clear what the anxiety was. That's how I knew it was anxiety. I was like, oh, this is anxiety. That's what I used to feel all the time. But typically, it felt like what you were describing, where I did not know something was coming. So this is definitely going to be a future call. But people would ask me how I would ever trust my ex-husband. He cheated on me basically the entire 14 and a half years we were together. So people are like, how do you trust him? I don't. I trust the universe to take care of me. So one of the reasons that I couldn't connect the dots of this feeling equals anxiety is because sometimes I would just have this feeling, but I would have no context clues. And so I'm like,
yep.
I need there's something that I need to know. Something's happening. Something's about to happen. There's something going on here. And then, of course, I would find out that he had cheated on me or was cheating on me or whatever. And then the feeling is gone instantly because no more anxiety. I know what the thing is. So it's probably like psychic superpowers picking up on whatever and nudging me with that feeling of anxiety.
And that's where now in the future, when you feel anxiety, you get to look at that and be like, okay, something's happening, something's going on. And you get to open your eyes then and pay attention.
Yeah.
Where do I need to put my focus?
To change.
And that's where the power comes in. Doesn't mean you're going to always let go all at one fell swoop to something. It doesn't mean that you're going to be like, oh, that's what this means. Yay, hula hoops and unicorns. Wee. Because sometimes when you're feeling anxious or agitated, it's not going to be comfortable.
Hula hoops and unicorns has me chuckling, by the way.
Yeah, well, so give yourself the permission, going back to the first part of the conversation, to, if you recognize what those feelings or sensations, because sometimes they're a physical feeling, sometimes it's an emotional feeling, that it's time to let something go, give yourself the space to be with those, give yourself permission to feel them, and then give yourself permission to let go of whatever that is that you are ready to let go of, in whatever way you're ready to let go of it.
Yeah. And now is a really good time since half the solar system is in retrograde.
Oh, dear God. Let it all go. Let it go. Let it go. Oh, my gosh. Absolutely. Now that's going to be in my head all the rest of the day. But yes, everything. I think I told Bear the other day, all of the planets are in retrograde. And I'm like, okay, that's an exaggeration, but
there's like 6 of them. So it's basically all of them. Let's be honest.
Right. Plus Chiron. And, and oh, my God. And isn't that one, is it Chiron? And I forget. Chiron and Aries. It's all about letting go and communication. And so stop the struggle is what comes up. That's how you step into living life on your own terms. Stop the struggle. If it's time to let it go, let the shit go. Let it go.
We don't have strong feelings about this at all.
No. And I realize sometimes it's easier to say, just let it go, just let that shit go, than it feels. But sometimes it's really not.
And in the instances that it feels like it's easier said than done, just be willing to be willing to be willing. Because
the Leo's prayer.
Just because it is, how do I explain this? It's not always time to let go when we are ready to let go, which sounds weird. I was ready to let go of my marriage before I ever said I do. But while we were separated, God was like, yeah, you have all of this work that needs to be done. It was like I got a checklist. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? So here I am sitting up on my unicorn with my fanciest judgy pants on, judging the hell out of my ex-husband. And the universe is like, yeah, you're not so amazing yourself right now in relationship land. And I was just like, oh. But if I hadn't been willing to let go, who knows how much longer it would have taken me to work through those things that I needed to work through in that relationship so that I could walk away from it with ease. I didn't walk into another relationship with anybody that lied to me or cheated on me after that experience because I was done with all of the energies of that. So sometimes it is easier said than done, and sometimes you really only need the willingness because there's so more that that situation has to teach you. And once you have the willingness to let it go, you can learn those things that are necessary for you to learn so that you can fully outgrow the experience. And you don't end up with another job or another relationship that you hate just as much as the one you just left.
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's not do that. And again, give yourself a bit of compassion and grace, both through the process, but around the emotions, especially where it in relation to relationships and people. Because sometimes guilt can come up. Oh, but if I do this, we've been friends for this long. Oh, but it's my cousin. Oh, but it's whatever. Oh, but it's my husband and I should be wanting to stay married, but he's a complete, or my wife, because some of you who might be listening, it could be the other way around. It's not that men are all sucky. It could be that my wife drives me nuts and I can't stand her and she doesn't bring anything to the relationship. Maybe it's that she's a bitch and he's a douche and whatever. Or it could just be that they're people that don't need to be in your life anymore. Yeah. And maybe you don't need to be in theirs. And give yourself a little bit of compassion if you're feeling guilty over it, because you do deserve what you deserve. You do deserve what you want. All of the yumminess and juiciness and staying in something that has run its course, staying in something whose time has ended, will simply fester like a horrible wound and not be pleasant for anyone. As much as my breakup with my ex-fiance sucked at the time, I look at it now and let me tell you, there's all sorts of thank the sweet baby Jesus, all that's holy, and a few things that aren't around that. However, at the time it was awful. But I always say that any relationship, and this could go for your job too, any relationship that doesn't work for one doesn't work for either one.
Whoa, that's deep.
Right? Took me a long time to get there. But bless them and send them on their way. Because by holding on when something is past its lifespan, are you preventing not just yourself, but that person from experiencing what they could be?
Man, I wasn't expecting things this deep today.
Yeah, me either. Shit shows
now
up,
I have more things to think about. Thanks, Naomi.
Damn it. I know. Well, you and me both, sister. You and me both.
This is what happens when you have healing artists for friends. You don't have simple conversations. You have powerful ones. And then you walk away going, now I got to think about my life and my choices.
Crap, I feel the shift happening. It's about to hit the fan. So those of you listening, if for you it has also been like, oh, whoa, now I'm going to have to look at that in my life, and you're needing some support around it, know that Leela and I are available and here. Pop it in the comments, pop us a message, go find us on our websites or Facebook or over at Heart Over Ego Radio. Find us. You don't have to go through this alone.
We're around, and we love holding spaces for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else to leave the people with?
No, I think it feels like it's all been said.
Yeah, I will be out building, I guess I'll be out documenting my library because I'm pretty sure I have one. I'm pretty sure I have one already. I just have to,
get your card catalog in order.
Yep, basically.
Do they even have those anymore?
They do. They're mostly computerized now, but they do.
Yeah, that's no fun.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. And I hope this conversation was as juicy for you as it is for us, because it went a little bit longer than normal. We'll see you guys next time. Well, I guess we won't see you, but we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone.